Driving clarity is one of these terms that gets thrown around a lot and is now often dismissed as corporate lingo. I hate corporate lingo, but I love the idea underneath this particular term, so let's take a closer look. My name is Juan Carlos Fontecha, and I'm a software engineer currently based here in Seattle. And on top of my day-to-day engineering work, I make videos sharing my constant pursuit of clarity and meaning navigating the tech industry. I talk about things like coding, engineering, career growth, and what I learned about this lifestyle. In this video, I want to share with you my interpretation of what driving clarity means, why I think it's important, and of course some actionable ways to start getting better at this. Now, I already talked about curiosity in a previous video, but I felt compelled to follow up with this one because I believe that curiosity very much fuels this particular skill, and it can often result in significant business impact. What does it mean to drive clarity? To add some context before trying to define driving clarity, consider this common pattern of many scenarios at work. First, you're faced with an objective to pursue, and this could be a business goal, a feature to develop, or a bug to fix. Now, to get from where you are to a place where that objective is met, there's often many unknowns. There's more than a single way to get there, a fair amount of pitfalls to consider, and more than a single person to involve or get help from. How you navigate all that uncertainty is what I interpret as driving clarity, and I believe this applies equally to work you're doing individually and work an entire team is in charge of. The thing that I find really fascinating about this is that it's a game of questions, and coming up with questions, let alone good questions, doesn't always come naturally to people. I know it doesn't to me, and that's why I keep trying to cultivate my curiosity. As part of that research, I came across a really good article from Harvard Business Review that showcases this skill in several leaders. One of my favorite comes from Greg Dyke, where he was appointed Director General of the BBC. Before even starting his newly announced role, he spent a couple of months visiting the BBC's major locations and talking to employees. The response was to expect, of course, a speech from him, but instead they got a quite simple question. What is the one thing I should do to make things better for you? And then he followed up with, what is the one thing I should do to make things better for our viewers and our listeners? And then he carefully listened to the answers that the employees gave him. And Greg used their responses to inform his thinking about the problems the BBC was facing and to identify what to work on first. But why is it important? Here's one way I like to phrase it. If I'm invested in pushing my career forward, it is in my best interest to maximize the value I provide to the business. And realistically, I'm always going to have a limited amount of time to get stuff done at work. Driving clarity, getting good at this game of questions, results in cutting through a lot of the noise and pitfalls that could derail my work from having a significant impact. Put another way, getting better at coming up with questions, coming up with them sooner, and knowing where to direct them allows me to accomplish more, meaning increase the value that I can provide, with the same effort and energy. From our previous story, Greg modeled the importance of these behaviors by asking questions and genuinely listening to the answers. He later went ahead and highlighted the fact that when we're exploring new terrain, listening is as important as talking. It helps us fill in the gaps of our knowledge and to identify other potential questions to investigate. How to get better at this? My journey in trying to get better at this eventually led me to another article that broke this skill down into actionable advice in far better words than I could put together right now. So let's take a look. And as always, I'll leave the link in the description below in case you want to read more about that. Embrace the discomfort of not knowing. We've all grown to love certainty, right? That's just how we were conditioned growing up. To find definitive, correct answers and try to reject as much uncertainty as possible, deeming it as a risk. While this allows us to simplify the world in our early stages in life, it's often counterproductive when we need to operate in highly uncertain environments. This is one idea that I loved exploring in Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book Anti-Fragile, and it's also one of the reasons I think Microsoft has done so well under Satya, since he constantly pushes his employees to develop what he likes to call a growth mindset. And it's essentially just adopting a learn-it-all mentality as opposed to a know-it-all. Distinguish between complicated and complex. I was honestly surprised when reading this one and the article I just mentioned because I certainly defaulted to using these two interchangeably. While I think that's fine in casual conversations, it's very useful to make the distinction when trying to drive through uncertainty in the workplace. Complicated describes things that are large in scope, highly technical, and generally difficult to understand. However, you can break complicated things into easier to digest bits, and it eventually makes sense. And the process to do this is fairly straightforward, even if it isn't necessarily easy. Complex, on the other hand, describes things that are also probably a bit large in scope, but they are also riddled with uncertainty. We're talking about projects with interdependent parts, some of which may change over time and in unpredictable ways. Complex ones are the ones we're more concerned with in this video, and they often require a couple of failed attempts in the beginning to eventually get right. This is also why it's important not to reject the discomfort that uncertainty brings. Let go of perfectionism. This one is a bit easier to digest, but its importance shouldn't go unnoticed. Striving for perfectionism when there's no clarity in the outcome is pretty pointless. I've seen perfectionism in me as a direct consequence of fears and insecurity. It makes me anxious not to have a good answer or results up front, and the way I default to getting around that is to try and perfect whatever it is I'm working on. This has sometimes worked for me, but other times I've seen myself just digging deeper and deeper into the wrong hole. The advice I'm trying to take from this is to loosen my grip over these assumptions and embrace that sometimes I'll be making mistakes. And that's fine because I'm hoping I'll learn from them. And I am prioritizing trajectory and growth across time over victory in the present. Resist oversimplifications and quick conclusions. This is exactly what I started trying to do, and I talked a bit about this in my video about curiosity. And it's highly related to what we just mentioned about constantly seeking certainty. We're wired to try and simplify complexities in order to operate, and this can lead to a false sense of security. Again, digging deeper and deeper without realizing you're in the wrong spot. My goal here, when I'm faced with unknowns, is to try and resist the urge to act on them immediately and try to validate whatever assumptions I'm making about it. Don't go at it alone. I had a really good conversation with my manager last week where we explored what it really means to become a senior engineer, and a big part of it is knowing when to ask for help. It's very easy to default to individual efforts, but when we're faced with unclear challenges and unknown interdependencies, it might not be super productive. And a good strategy might be to reach out to other people and ask for their perspective. This can not only result in the clarity we're looking for, but also bring up even more things that we hadn't considered, or course correct the direction in which other teams and dependencies are headed in. The words driving clarity are thrown around fairly often, and it's very easy to dismiss them. But if you take a moment to stop and break this skill down, I believe that you can double or triple the impact you're making and the value you're providing with the same amount of effort. It's just a better directed effort. While I'm really enjoying learning this and sharing it with you today, I am not a master of this skill, and I often still feel overwhelmed with uncertainty and feel like I could be operating much more effectively. So if you have any advice you would like to share, please feel free to comment below. I'm sure other people would benefit from it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.